Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to something else. Something else, Daddy.
This is Nickel Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 190 of Something Else. Feast your hair holes on this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action from May the 7th, 2003. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is, let me see here, the Buff Bagwell to my Brian Lawler. It's Cindy. Cindy, how are you today?
Can we give a shout out to Tony Storm on Saturday's episode of Collision?
Of course.
Because during a promo, she essentially lambasted WWE for fighting several LGBT wrestlers over the past few days.
In the interest of fairness. Now, I still think, my biggest issue with all this, and it doesn't matter what company I'm talking about, there has to be some degree of responsibility when it comes to contracts you're signing people to. These contracts are incredibly one-sided, and at the same time, you are asking people to promise you the next 3 to 5 years of their lives, while at the same time, you can just give anybody 90 days notice at the drop of a hat. At the same time, by and large, the people let go were people that were barely being used. And I did think it was hilarious that Nick Khan did that comment the other day about how they don't sign people and just have them sit on the bench. And then Dakota Kai basically said that she's sitting on the bench doing nothing. And then they fired her.
That was a message to the locker room. Shut up. And she'll probably be replaced by some nameless person in NXT.
Well, they all have names, Some just aren't very good.
Yeah, it'll be somebody nobody remembers in 2 years.
Now you don't know that. It could be, well, what about, I can't believe you would disparage, oh well, I'm sure somebody will come up. But yeah, we're talking about something almost as good as this crap with WWE. We're talking about TNA, episode number 44, May 7th, 2003. We are almost at the 1-year anniversary show.
Welcome to miserable May, ladies and gentlemen.
And it's only going uphill from here, folks. So before we get into the on-screen stuff, let's talk about the behind-the-scenes stuff. So they are attempting to build the 1-year anniversary show as a big fucking deal. So they're selling tickets now. First row, $40. Second row, $25. And general admission, $15. Keep in mind that right now, they cannot sell $15 and $10 tickets most weeks. But they are trying to convince you 6 weeks in advance to pay $40 for a ticket.
I'm going to guess how many of those tickets actually got sold.
Well, we'll see come June 18th, won't we?
Oh, so they're raising the ticket prices on the June 18th show, not the
Yeah,
rest of these shows.
the 1 year anniversary show.
I
That's why
mean,
I said
it's
that's why I said they're doing it for the 1 year anniversary show.
I mean, it's decent business sense. Charge more for the big event.
The problem is if nobody's buying your shit now when it's cheaper, why the hell would they pay for it later when it's more expensive?
FOMO.
I don't get the feeling that people going to these shows have FOMO. Um, if they had FOMO, that freebie line wouldn't be 2/3 of the line. And I apologize. Technically, this week it wasn't 2/3. The paid attendance was about 450 out of 1,100. So that's more about, 58% did not fear of missing out. Um, and to continue the behind the scenes drama, uh, apparently Vince Russo and his people have complained so much to Dixie Carter about Jeff Jarrett that Dixie Carter has sided with Jeff Jarrett this week in the power struggle between Jarrett and Russo. And Russo basically was walking around with his tail tucked between his legs this week. So, yeah, this is the behind the scenes stuff is basically the only entertaining shit on the show.
Well,
Um,
we say that, and then we get the first match.
well, before we get the first match, we get the first interview segment, which is Mike Tenay and Don West in the ring to start the show, announcing that tonight, as promoted last week, we're going to have a hardcore Falls Count Anywhere gauntlet match called Anarchy in the Asylum, where you could be eliminated by a throw over the top rope or by pinning them anywhere in the building. Now, they then announce that there will be several qualifying matches, and we'll get to them during the show. They say that there are 11 people who have already qualified for the gauntlet match. Now, we're going to go through the matches involving the people who are forced to qualify for this match. And keeping that in mind, just remember the people who are in the gauntlet who do not have to qualify. And again, if this were real, keep it. I want you to, like, in your head, think of 11 people in TNA who you would think would not have to qualify to be in a number one contenders match. And think of the people who you think, in theory, would have to qualify for such a match. Now, of course, you know who the primary writer of the show is, so you can automatically assume you got those two lists backwards. Case in point, our opening match, which is Elix Skipper and Low Key versus AJ Styles and D'Lo Brown in an Anarchy in the Asylum qualifying match. So, we have one team who were tag team champions for several months. We have another team with one guy who was tag team champion and X Division champion multiple times, teaming with another guy who got a world title match, not that long ago on this show. And these four guys are competing to see which two of them can enter into the number one contenders gauntlet match at the end of the show. And so with that, for those remembering last week's stupid stipulation, due to the fact that Jerry Lynn defeated Christopher Daniels, this means that Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red, the baby faces, will defend the tag team titles against one member of Triple X in a handicap match for the belts. Now, you can obviously make the assumption that if Low Key and Elix Skipper are in this match, which member of Triple X will be competing for the tag team titles later on tonight. Um, so Triple X gets the heat on AJ when Key smacked him with a cartwheel kick as he came off the ropes. AJ at one point hit Curtis Axel's McGillicudder for a 2 count. You know what that means, right? Obviously, AJ used his time machine, went into the future, saw Curtis Axel using that move, and stole it for himself.
And then Curtis Axel said, he was trying to fuck on me.
Only the referees try to fuck on him. And actually, that wasn't even Curtis Axel. That was Ted DiBiase.
Still, he was still trying to fuck on me.
Oh, well. Some fucking thing happened where the referee fell down and grabbed D'Lo Brown's ankle for some reason, while Low-Key hit a springboard kick to the jaw of D'Lo. I would assume the referee got bumped for about 5 seconds, but this continues my rule of I refuse to rewind TNA and rewatch anything. I note that every time Skipper tagged in, he would immediately be cut off after Low-Key had managed to kick the ass of whoever he was in the ring with. The finish saw D'Lo pin Low-Key with a combo low-down neckbreaker from AJ. This was a hell of an opener. Say what you want about what the fans do and do not want, but it has been proven time and time again on this show that these shows give a much better vibe when you start with a good wrestling match. I gave this match a 7.5 out of 10.
I really love this match.
How much did you really love this match?
A 9 out of 10.
Well, that is some quality love right there.
It is. Triple X is always great. AJ is always great. I think this might even be D'Lo's best match in TNA.
I mean, if you can't have a really good match with Low-Key and Elix Skipper, you cannot have a really good match.
Period. Yeah.
So to the SCX locker room where Goldilocks interviewed main event Glen Gilbertti about being in the Gauntlet match, and he mentions how this is the biggest opportunity of his career. Glen told Sex that tonight he, by himself, will win the Gauntlet match, and then SCX will win the tag team titles as well. Glen then said, and I was trying to figure out what the hell he meant. Glen says that last week Mike Sanders went toe-to-toe with Mike Awesome. And I thought he was implying that they had a match and Mike Sanders beat Mike Awesome. I'm like, when the fuck did that happen? I eventually figured out, I think, what they meant. When 58 people interfered in the main event world title match, Mike Sanders and Mike Awesome fought each other.
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, you know, I it's not something I'd bring attention to even as tongue-in-cheek crap since it wasn't anything focused on. It's like, oh look, here's a whole bunch of people fighting each other. I doubt it was ever even mentioned that at one point Sanders and Awesome were fighting each other. Because why would it?
No, because here's what they said. I remember from last week. All they said was SEX is coming out to help Raven, but they got beaten back by the New Church and AMW. I guess during that little piece, you know, Sanders and Awesome were beating up on each other. So now
Wonderful.
Sanders is having his chest puffed up by Gilbertti saying he's a giant killer.
Oh, wonderful. Now we get a renewed push for Mike Sanders. So Glenn then leaves the locker room because he's informed us that he's going to go kick Jeff Jarrett's ass. All right, then, if that's what you insist you're going to be doing. So Don and Tenay talk more about what is going to happen tonight. Glenn storms out to the ring and then walks to the back to Jeff Jarrett's locker room, where Jeff Jarrett is randomly on crutches because apparently he has a hip and knee injury after the match with Raven last week. And so because Jeff Jarrett was handicapped, that meant that Glen Gilbertti could actually get the heat on Jeff Jarrett. The same Jeff Jarrett that would single-handedly take out 8 to 9 men at a time got beaten up here by main event Glen Gilbertti. And in fact, it gets better because it wasn't even just, oh, he beat him up in the locker room. Glen Gilbertti beat him up into the outside picnic area. There were people standing around and watching this, and nobody bothered to try to break them up. And eventually, Glen got tired of kicking Jeff Jarrett's ass, and for now anyway, and moved away. This was certainly the most recent backstage angle. Any thoughts on this?
I mean, yes, you actually get your facade of being a badass, but at what cost? And plus, it wasn't even that great of a one-sided event.
Is Glen Gilbertti at the end of the day. This is the world that we live in currently, folks. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure if it's any better than if we were watching modern day wrestling at this point.
Except the wrestling quality would be a bit better.
Depending on your opinion. Then we go to our next match, which again was certainly a match. New Jack versus the Sandman versus Sabu in an Anarchy in the Asylum qualifying hardcore match. Because the main event being a hardcore match meant that we needed a preview with 3 guys who were past their prime at this point. Remember when TNA did the Hardcore Justice ECW reunion show?
Oh,
and
good Lord.
Yes, and they did a backstage segment where New Jack said he was going to make Borash his bitch before they walked off together. What do you think ever happened there? Because, I mean, we never saw any follow-up with New Jack wanting to make Jeremy Borash his bitch. And Borash seemed like he walked off willingly, so, it felt like he was very willing to take part in this.
I don't know, but he had to make it quick because in a couple days he had to show up on the Maury Povich show.
In 2010?
Yeah. New Jack was on the Maury Povich show around this time.
They meant Borash.
No, I meant New Jack.
Why was New Jack on the Maury Povich show? Who was doing a paternity suit against him?
No. This is before it became all paternity and lie detectors. This is around the time we had troubled teens who were being bitches and pseudo badasses, and somebody needed to break them down.
Well,
enter New Jack.
If anyone is going to whatchamacallit, what else was I gonna say? If anyone is gonna scare people straight, I would have New Jack running out with a knife. So New Jack takes the mic, and I didn't mention this earlier, but Miss Elizabeth died this week. And she died because she mixed her medication with alcohol and overdosed.
Yeah.
And so New Jack, being the smart human being that he is, cut a promo about how he, Sabu, and Sandman used to do a lot of drugs and a whole lot of illegal shit in ECW. Okay, then. And I think the point of this promo was that due to them bonding over doing all this illegal shit, Sabu should not be on Jeff Jarrett's side. All right, then.
Kind of makes sense.
So remember like 2 months ago when Sandman and Steve Corino had a tag team match and Steve Corino walked to the ring and got his ass kicked while the Sandman was walking through the arena? Well, Sandman decided that the best way to start this match was to just hang out in the stands with the fans and let New Jack and Sabu have a match. And I'll be honest, I'm sure there was a tag team match at some point with RVD and Sabu versus the Gangstas. I have zero memory of Sabu and New Jack ever wrestling each other. So
probably on some
this
throwaway XPW show, but
this may be a first time ever. And it shows you why even Paulie would not have booked that match in ECW. So they are now making it part of the storyline that Raven's contract expired last week, and that's why he is not at the show this week. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And here's the thing, though. So we're gonna say in storyline, if Raven would have won the belt, then TNA would now not have a champion because their world champion, his contract expired and he no longer was going to be here with the belt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Welcome to TNA.
Oh my God, I just looked it up, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
RVD versus Sandman in a one-on-one match. Never happened.
Okay.
But
I don't think anyone would ever expect that one.
No. In different connotation of matches, it happened 8 times. There was a 9th one listed. I mentioned XPW. Turns out that was when New Jack won the XPW World Heavyweight title because Sabu no-showed. Go figure.
Okay, we got to rewind here. I know we don't rewind on TNA shows, but what you just said, we need to rewind. You said that Rob Van Dam and the Sandman never had a singles match, but they had 8 tag team matches.
No, I said Sabu and the Sandman.
Sabu and Sandman had singles matches. You said Van Dam and the Sandman. I think you meant Sabu and New Jack.
That's what I meant, Sabu and New Jack.
I'm like, when you said Van Dam and Sandman, I'm like, okay. Like, I mean, I know that they were feuding, but when they went off in the singles matches, Van Dam wrestled Dreamer and Sabu wrestled Sandman. But yeah, you got us all backwards here. But either way, the thought of RVD versus the Sandman was at least
plausible,
pseudo more interesting than this match. Because at least Van Dam would have at least done his 20 minutes of weird offense. Sandman very slowly made it to the ring while Sabu and New Jack hit each other in the head. To show how important this match is, during this match, Glen Gilbertti was shown still beating up Jeff Jarrett outside the arena.
That was the best part of the match, by the way.
I have never had a match in my life. I could not take a bump. I've told this story. I could not convince myself to fall down. However, I will say right now, I could have a performance in a wrestling match that at worst case scenario would rival Sandman's in this match.
Yes.
I have never seen anyone as lazy in a match as the Sandman was here. Now Goldilocks is outside the arena as Jeff Jarrett is being carried away in an ambulance. Meanwhile, in this match, the one that we're actually theoretically watching, the finish saw New Jack get in a lift, a scissors lift, high above the arena floor. And this took forever for it to raise up. And keep in mind, while he's doing this, Sabu is laying on a table. And if New Jack would have collided with Sabu, I would have shit on this match even more than I already am. However, it took New Jack a full minute to get this scissor lift to go all as high as he wanted it to go. And by the way, Sandman was standing up there with him. So really important to note that. So New Jack raises up in the scissors lift, falls off in theory onto Sabu, but Sabu moved out of the way because he had 6 minutes to recover. And Jack crashed through the table. And before the crowd could really appreciate what they just saw, Sabu just dove on top of him for the pin. Now, due entirely to the fact that Sabu moved, and I didn't have to go on a 5-minute rant about how Sabu was laying on a table for 5 minutes waiting for New Jack to dive onto him. Due entirely to that, I gave this match a 1.5 out of 10.
Can I hit the eject button for this show? No, I can't. We're already doing this. All right, fine. Nope. 1 out of 10. This match sucked. I was not lying when I said the continuing beatdown between Jeff Jarrett and Glen Gilbertti beating up Jeff Jarrett was the best part of the match.
And by the way, this is not the worst part of the show. This is not the worst match of the show.
No, it's not.
So remember last week when Tracy Brooks and her giant breasts debuted and she randomly got into a fight with Lollipop? Well, Tracy Brooks is still backstage. We still don't have a name for her yet, but I'm tired of calling her that girl. Because at least when Alexis didn't have a name, she informed us her name was Shut Up Bitch, which was at least funny. Tracy is demanding to be in the men's gauntlet match. Bill Barron says that she does not deserve to be in the match. And so Tracy offered to give him a blowjob to get in the match. And then Bill Barron said he would now consider it, and then told Goldilocks, why doesn't she do things like that?
There's more to this.
Oh, there is so much more. But
yeah, because you missed a key part.
Oh, I didn't miss it. They're making a 3-way match with her, Trinity, and Desire later on.
No, Tracy said during this promo that it's offensive to Trinity, Desire, and Goldie, to which they pan to Goldilocks, and she goes, quote, I admit that I'm tired of being the chick that holds the stick. Pan.
Yippee. So the one person who's good at the one thing they do on this show, we're going to transition them into doing something else.
Don't wait a month and they get replaced.
At least I know Scott Hudson's on his way in, and that'll at least give us the comedy of him telling us that the King of the Mountain match is really quite simple, and then spending 5 minutes explaining to us how the match is really quite simple.
See you in a year for that one.
Oh boy. So when America's Most Wanted video package aired, followed by a promo by both men, where they both vowed to win their match tonight and then win the Anarchy in the Asylum match. Storm agreed to shake Harris's hand before the match. Oh yeah, by the way, I want to point out Sabu, former ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Sandman, former ECW World Heavyweight Champion, New Jack, former tag team champion. All 3 men are big stars. All 3 men have, won big matches in their career. All 3 men had to qualify to be in the Anarchy in the Asylum match. Moving on. Chris Harris versus James Storm in the Anarchy in the Asylum qualifying match. Chris Harris and James Storm, the most successful tag team on this show, multiple-time tag team champions. They've won, 3 times now?
About that, yeah.
At least 2, if not 3. They have to now qualify to be in the number 1 contenders world title gauntlet match. Again, just keep this in mind. Okay, so Don West puts over the match he saw last year between Harris and Storm that was so good that they both got a call from TNA like the next day, giving them a job, and the rest is history. Now, that is a true story, and actually Abyss also got his spot in that original Gauntlet match because of that show. However, here's the thing. and we've gone over this. TNA, especially until they discovered that Dixie Carter had money, or at least Dixie Carter's parents had money, they were going as cheap as they could. And they were bringing in the cheap local guys. And Chris Harris and James Storm, they could have not had that famous match that got them their job, and they would have gotten a spot. They would have at least gotten more than one tryout because they were local guys who would have worked cheap. With that said, like they earned their spot by working hard before TNA started, and they've earned their spot since then by basically being the glue holding the tag team division together at this point.
Pretty much, yeah. And you're right about them being locals who work cheap. I mean, Burt Prentice is still around TNA at this point. He's essentially their local Nashville promoter. And sorry, I'm just gathering my thoughts. And they were wrestling on his shows with OVW guys on the same shows. So if they didn't get picked up by TNA and landed there, I bet you dollars known as Jim Cornette was going to phone up Vince and says, hey, I got two guys who are going to be cheap. They're going to be a great tag team. We could make them into like Cowboys or something in OVW to bring them up to SmackDown or something.
Damn it, pal. Let me put you in touch with Johnny Ace. I'll tell you what. Are they found in lingerie catalogs? God damn it, Vince! No, they're not in lingerie catalogs. Well, goddamn, pal. I don't think Johnny might sign them, but let me put you through to his voicemail.
Oh, hello. This is Johnny Ace. Now, if you excuse me, I'm masturbating to a lingerie catalog. Please leave a message after the beep. Ugh.
Here's the funniest thing about that, and like I would like to assume that it was at least a recent enough lingerie catalog, but he signed Kelly Kelly and Alicia Fox out of a lingerie catalog. And Kelly Kelly, when she debuted in ECW, was 19 years old. So I don't want to insinuate anything, but it is entirely possible that he was looking at an underage woman and signed her because she looked hot in lingerie. The whole story is creepy enough to begin with, but when you think she was only 19 when she was on the damn roster anyway, who's to say how old she was when she was modeling in that catalog?
She would have to be 18.
You do?
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, this isn't the show to have this argument on it, but I mean, you can open up well, I don't even know if they still have Sears catalogs, but I mean, fine, let's go 20 years ago. You could open up the Sears catalog and you have children modeling swimsuits. And I'm not saying swimsuits and underwear are the same thing, but they're close enough to the same damn thing that you could theoretically have a 16-year-old in a bikini and John Laurinaitis drooling over them and, go from there.
Well, he did spend a lot of time in Japan, so it would track.
Well, Mrs. Baba was a fan of the nice, big, tall, handsome guy, Gene, who wore a nice suit, and he said, yes, ma'am, and no, and yes, sir, and, really got over as the nice, handsome guy, Gene. No one ever asked him what he thought about Mrs. Baba passing away.
Does anybody actually care about John Laurinaitis to ask?
Well, I cared enough to make a joke about it when Mrs. Baba died 5 years ago. So, but I don't think anybody else did.
Nope.
Anywho, back to, the match. Harris and Storm went about telling a story where both men knew each other so well that they were reversing each other's moves and reversing the reversals. So while they were wrestling and having a pretty decent little match, Tenay and West were busy talking about how tonight Trinity Desire and Tracy Brooks Breasts will have a three-way match where the winner will be in the Gauntlet match. Tenay then tried to say that this is a contact sport, unlike golf or tennis, and it's ridiculous that you'd have a woman in the men's number one contender world title gauntlet match, which at least is your valid argument about it. Don West, who, by the way, he's not a heel, like they're both babyface announcers here. Don West said that maybe they'll be put in their place by being put in this match with men where men will beat them up.
Welcome to 2003.
Yep. Harris was continually frustrated because Storm would prove to just be a little better throughout the match, which also seems to be the story of their respective careers. The finish saw Storm hit the 8-second ride for a 2 count, go for a springboard what a maneuver, but Harris speared him in midair for a 2 count, and then the match won with Storm reversing a sunset flip for the pin. After the match, Storm offered to shake Harris's hand, but Harris turned to walk away. He thought better of it. He came back and shook Storm's hand, and if I didn't know better, I was going to expect to write the next words be Harris attacks Storm turning heel. However, I know that does not happen for a few years. So here's the thing. I'm not going to say these two are as popular as the Hardy Boys are and were, but these two wrestling is like the Hardy Boys at the time wrestling each other when WWE would do that once every couple of years. The crowd does not want to see Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy wrestle each other. The closest we ever got to that was when TNA, of all people, managed to successfully do it with the final deletion. But this crowd in Nashville loves these guys. They do not want to see them wrestling each other. And while they were not sitting on their hands, they did not turn their back on it. It was obvious they did not want to see this match. And with that said, the match was still good. I gave it a 5.5 out of 10. But, it's one of those things that I hope it really beat somebody over the head that these two should not be broken up.
I agree with the comparison, especially after the Matt and Jeff Hardy WrestleMania 25 match, which was one of many faults with that show.
Well, even before that, they had a match in 2001 after the Alliance ended, and it was so bad that they got put back together as soon as possible.
Right, because they weren't as experienced as we thought. As solo players, that is, not as a tag team. Anyway, 5 out of 10. The mood around the match was kind of dour, and I really I could appreciate a good wrestling match, but I kind of need a little bit more from the crowd, and it looks like they didn't want it. I kind of didn't want it either. So can we just skip over this Eric Watts thing?
So we'll skip over, and I'm just going to say that Eric keeps cutting promos, and he's going to do this, I think, for the next 2 months, where he keeps talking about how Eric from WCW, DDP's best friend Eric, is coming in to be the director of authority. He's going to say that a lot. And if you can't see where this one is going, Eric Bischoff is not coming into TNA. At least for 7 years. But yeah, I don't even need to bother to spoil it because you could figure that shit out. But Eric Watts is going to keep telling us for the next 2 months that Eric from WCW is going to be the director of authority.
And during this time, he's going to really pour it on Goldilocks.
In 1997, Beulah McGillicuddy, a woman who before that had one real singles match in her career, had a singles match with Bill Alfonso, a referee who never had a match in his life, at least a real match. These two on an ECW show had one of the most intense and well-received matches in ECW history. A match you could go back right now in 2025 and watch it and it still be enjoyable. Now, with that said, I would like to now talk about a match between multiple trained wrestlers that was nowhere near in the league of Beulah McGillicuddy and Bill Alfonso. Up next, it is Tracy versus Trinity versus Desire with Sonny Siaki and David Young in an Anarchy in the Asylum qualifying match. First of all, where the hell is Alexis when you need her? Did her contract expire last week too?
No, I think she's still selling injuries from the massive damage she took last week.
Last week, Jesus Christ, she got brained with a chair like 2 weeks in a row and came back the next week each time.
Right, but remember, we're still selling the fact that the Gathering's not there because Raven's not there.
HIF. That's what I say. HIF.
What the hell does HIF mean?
HIFT. PFFT. That's a note of derision.
I just thought you normally go. Poof. And speaking of, poof, out to ruin the fun. Yeah.
So, my God. Let me explain to you this segment here before the match began. Kid Cash walked out and informed his property, Trinity, that last week she was suspended so she could learn to concentrate properly on the career of Kid Cash. Kid Cash implied that Trinity gives good blowjobs, and all Trinity could do in response was smile and shake her head. Kid Cash gave her two options. Option one is that Kid Cash kicks her ass. And option two is that she apologizes to him by sucking his dick. Trinity took option number one, where Kid Cash kicked her ass. Now, I say this, and you and, every wrestling fan ever probably understood as this meaning that Trinity went and decked Kid Cash and Cash were out of the ring and, whatever happened, happened. Kid Cash kicked Trinity's ass. Kid Cash, a 200-ish pound full-grown adult man, beat up a woman and then handcuffed her while continuing to beat her up. And at this point, I'm like, is Jeff Jarrett wrestling in this match or something? Because why are women getting their asses kicked by men? Cash then drags Trinity to the back, and the match finally starts with Tracy versus Desire with Sonny Siaki on the broadcast team. So Desire sent Tracy to the outside and went for a what the fuck was that, as Desire, I think, went for a dive through the ropes, but tripped on her way down. This may have been the worst 3 minutes of wrestling in 2003. Tracy had the pin with a flying crotch, but Siaki and Young jumped up on the apron. Young accidentally punched Desire, and Tracy got the pin. This match was so much worse than Minoru Suzuki versus Butterbean. Dave, I don't know how the hell you gave this match a higher rating than Minoru Suzuki versus Butterbean, but you should be ashamed of yourself, Dave. 0.
What star rating did Dave give this match, and what star rating did he give Minoru Suzuki versus Butterbean?
I don't think he actually gave a star rating to this match, but he gave Butterbean versus Minoru Suzuki like minus 459 stars.
You know what I give this match?
What?
Minus 5 stars. I'm agreeing with you. 0 out of 10. Good fucking lord. And make matters worse, we have an interrogator segment with the Harris brothers, to which I wrote, hey, I managed to beat Ash Pit 1 in Binding of Isaac.
What? What did you do?
I beat Ash Pit 1 in Binding of Isaac.
Okay.
That's what I was doing while watching this show.
So the Heresy do the interrogator segment, which is useless every week they ever do it. And this week, among the questions they asked, because you got to remember, this is May of 2003. They asked them if they preferred Clay Aiken or Ruben Studdard, who were the finalists in the second season of American Idol. And they said that they picked the white one. In case, you had any questions or doubts in your mind what their thoughts on race relations are. And I did think that this is probably before Clay Aiken came out as gay, so I can only imagine what they would have said if Clay Aiken had already come out.
I don't think he came out as gay until like 15 years later.
Let's see. Dave apparently had no comment at all. Let me see here. Literally all he says is, besides the women's match and Eric Watts trying to be funny, the low light was the New Jack promo. So he literally did not say anything specifically about that match.
Wow.
Yes.
He should have, though.
I agree. Before the next match, Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red agree to have another match for the X Division title, which should be phenomenal. We'll wait to see how that goes. We then get our 2-on-1 handicap match for the World Tag Team titles as Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red take on the Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels. In case you had any questions about what might happen in this match, Don West basically said, enjoy the match and because interference is coming. Now, you and I talked about this last week, and I said that I was willing to bet that Triple X was going to win the match through some sort of screw job, but I could not figure out what screw job they were going to go with. Well, never leave it to good old Vince Russo to not be creative in coming up with his screw jobs. Here on TNA, there is rampant interference in every fucking match. Every fucking match. There are constantly people running in and out. There are constantly people using chairs, tables, ladders, barbed wire, all this shit in matches that are alleged to have standard wrestling rules. And no one bats an eye. In fact, if they ever do, Don West just says, the referee's giving them a lot of leeway here. And that is the story of TNA. We essentially don't do disqualifications. We want a winner and a loser in every match, even if it makes the referee look stupid. He had a disqualification in this match. And the disqualification happened because after Elix Skipper and Low Key interfered 15,000 times during this match, Jerry Lynn got a chair and hit Christopher Daniels with it, which the referee saw, and because now this week he does not approve of such matters, he disqualified Jerry Lynn, meaning that based on the rules that got announced 6 months ago and never really got paid off at any point, the titles can change hands on a disqualification. So yes, Triple X win the tag team titles from Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red, because Vince Russo can't fucking book a wet dream, can't book Lassie in a pet shop. He saw a great match 2 weeks ago that the fans lost their shit for and loved and wanted to see more of, and he fucked with it so much that we got this steaming turd of a finish, this steaming turd of an angle, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to bet Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red probably never team again in this company. So yeah, 4.5 out of 10 for a match featuring Jerry Lynn, Amazing Red, and Christopher Daniels.
I was like, how the hell do you screw this up?
Well,
now we know how you screw it up.
Anything.
So I looked it up. You're right. They do not team up again.
Shock of all shocks.
Yep. It was fine. I had a feeling what was going to happen when I saw Triple X come out, and plus you had Jerry Lynn with this angle of, this is the new Jerry Lynn. I'm going to be more harder edged. I'm going to be more of a badass. Because fuck the youngsters and all that nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
because again,
yeah,
Jerry Lynn, like the nicest guy in the world, we're going to turn him heel.
Not even Paul Heyman could pull that off.
Oh,
and
wow.
We have this, and this should have been so much better. I would have been happier if they actually pulled the trigger on Jerry Lynn just turning heel, low blowing Red, leaving him out to dry, just so he could have an advantage for the X Division title match next week. I mean, that would have made sense. Throwing away the tag titles to have a better chance at winning the X Division title, which is something that AJ Styles did to Jerry Lynn, I think. Like, they were attempted that didn't get along at all. But now Triple X have the tag titles again, meaning, what was the point of ping-ponging it to Red and Lynn just so Red could be a double champion?
For all of like 1 week?
Right, and you undercut that by having him not even involved in the decision, continuing this Jerry Lynn nonsense, and it only gets worse. But we'll talk about that next week.
Yippee-ki-yay, Melon Farmer. Yippee-ki-yay. What was your rating for this?
4.
All right. Well, then we get our main event, Anarchy in the Asylum. Huh. Boy. Okay, so just remember the people who had to qualify for this match. Triple X, AJ Styles, D'Lo Brown, Chris Harris, James Storm, New Jack, Sandman, Sabu, all had to qualify for this match. These are people on the show every week, getting pushes. Most of the time, they're all winning matches, former champions. They're all having to qualify for this match. Let's go through this show, and we'll go through some of the people who did not have to qualify for this match. Case in point, number 1, Brian Lawler, a man who has not been on the show in a month, and I cannot even remember the last time he won a match.
Last time he won a match, he was teaming up with Eric Watts on Explosion, which does not count.
Can I tell you the last time he won a match on this show that we watch? The only one that counts. Number 2 is D'Lo Brown. Now, I will say this. The one thing TNA loves even more than the Royal Rumble is the 1995 Royal Rumble, where number one goes coast to coast. Spoiler alert, Brian Lawler will not be winning this match. Number three is Sonny Siaki. Now, they make a point to say that everyone is allowed to wear whatever they want. Everyone pretty much wrestled in their gear. D'Lo wore track pants, but I think he might be the only person who did not just wear his normal wrestling gear. Let's see. Number four is James Storm, and because we can't just have a fucking Royal Rumble, we have to have interference, constant interference in a Royal Rumble. So number four is James Storm. David Young runs in and lays out Storm with a spine buster. Chris Harris runs in for the save, accidentally hits his partner, and Storm's the first one eliminated. Great.
So we're continuing this angle again.
Yes. Number five is Kid Cash, who unhandcuffed himself from Trinity. Where the hell is Trinity, you might ask? Good question. Number six, Rick Steiner. Yes, Rick Steiner, who's wrestled on one TNA show back on the very first show on June 19th. He lost, and now he gets an automatic entry into this number one contenders match, while the other stars of the promotion had to qualify. Steiner dumped Siaki. I would like to point out that Rick did at least have a better performance than any of his brothers' matches in 2003. Number seven is Mike Awesome, who may or may not have lost an imaginary match to Mike Sanders last week. Awesome carried a table to the ring and set it up outside, and poor Don West had to try his best to explain why people were breaking up pins, because why are you breaking up pins in this match? Number eight is Just Incredible. They either paid for Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck, or got the TNA music guy to just lay down a track of the first 15 seconds.
That's exactly what they did, by the way.
Yeah, probably the latter. Awesome Incredible fought outside the ring, and the irony of it is that Incredible got the ECW title because Awesome jumped to WCW while still the champion. Number nine is Ron Killings in his first match since he brought Mabel to TNA several months ago. What the hell happened to Mabel? Who knows? Who cares?
Mabel was being paid more by Jerry Lawler. That's why he stuck around in Memphis.
So Awesome Incredible were off doing something on the other side of the arena. And at this point, I noticed that there are two referees in this match, and only two referees. So if I was one of the other people in the match, I would just run to the other side of the arena and just sit there for the next 20 minutes and see if anybody notices me. Number 10 is Tracy and her breasts. Lollipop left her cage. By the way, Lollipop, who had no problem with Tracy having a match earlier, Lollipop left her cage now and tried to have a cat fight with Tracy, but it led to Kid Cash beating up more women. Cash tried to get everyone to stand aside while he beat up Tracy, but instead they beat up Cash. Not sure why, because when number 11 Perry Saturn came out, Cash then gave Tracy the moneymaker and pinned her. And then the Masked Luchador ran in and threw Cash out. Geez, I wonder when the Masked Luchador grew breasts. Number 12 is Glen Gilbertti.
Isn't that kind of like a side effect from steroids?
Yes, it is. Just ask The Rock. Number 12 is main event Glen Gilbertti with the Heresies. Ron and/or Dawn just went in and threw out Rick Steiner and Ron Killings. Number 13 is Conan. Despite being a heel, he only goes after SEX. For some reason, Rick Steiner would not leave the ringside area. Finally, Ron and/or Dawn gave Conan an H-bomb on top of a table, and then another through the table, and Glenn pinned him. Number 14 is Buff Bagwell, who had 4 or 5 matches in TNA last year. He lost every single one of them and was last seen teaming with BG James in a tag team gauntlet match. And here he is, no need to qualify for the gauntlet match. Buff backdropped Lawler out of the ring. Glen then clotheslined Buff out of the ring. Number 15 is AJ Styles.
I need to hit the pause here for a second because we have a departure. This is officially Brian Lawler's Brian Lawler's last match in TNA.
It's probably also Buff's.
I will look that up. Just continue on.
Number 15 is AJ Styles. Mike Sanders now interferes and super kicks Awesome off the apron, which caused Awesome to be eliminated and fall through a table. And then finally, number 16, lucky number 16 is Sabu. So at this point, I think the only people left are Sabu, AJ, D'Lo, Just Incredible, Saturn, and Disco. And at this point, I note that I love that the 16-person gauntlet match had at least 7 people interfering in it. Sabu immediately tossed Credible. AJ with a springboard drop kick, but Saturn moved, so AJ hit D'Lo, and D'Lo sails over the top rope. So we have to have dissension between those two. Sabu gives Saturn... Here's the first great part of the match. Sabu gives Saturn a Hurricanrana over the top rope, where both go over the top rope and to the floor. But Sabu just gets back in the ring because it did not count for him. They tried to say, because he was giving somebody a move, that it didn't count. He doesn't count as an elimination. The crowd did not agree with that sentiment. And then they didn't agree a minute later when Sabu did a top rope springboard dive into the crowd, which again should have eliminated him a second time, but it didn't. And Glen at this point is wearing the Crimson Mask. AJ goes for the Styles Clash, but Glen backdrops him over the top rope, and we are down to 2 people. The 2 people one of whom are going to get a world title match, Sabu and main event Glen Gilbertti. And then we have a fucking ref bump. Now, do you remember about 3 minutes ago when I talked about, let me just go find it here. One second. Awesome, Incredible fight outside the ring. And this is a match with 2 referees. And, if it were me, I would leave the ring and run 20 feet in the opposite direction and hope nobody noticed me. So there were 2 referees in this match. One got bumped here. Where the hell did the second referee go? Plus, they bumped the referee so Raven could come in and interfere because it's a swerve, bro. He's really here. But why did they have to fucking bump the referee? We've had 7 fucking people interfere in this match. It's a no disqualification match.
This match had nothing going for it. It was just not good whatsoever. I noted here after Gilbertti gets the win, when Raven showed up and screwed Silver over, hey, I just beat Mother in Binding of Isaac with Tainted Lilith. Insert score here. Like it took me a minute. 3 out of 10.
3.5 out of 10.
Good.
Main event, Glen Gilbertti is the number 1 contender to the world's heavyweight title.
God.
So, okay. I am going to attempt to defend this bullshit. I'm going to attempt to. They have pushed Disco Inferno as a top heel for 3 months. And at this point, they basically have to fucking pay it off, and they have to have him do a match with Jarrett. However, I want Jarrett to do to Disco what Austin did to him and refuse to do a program with Disco because Disco is not over enough to deserve a match with Jeff Jarrett.
I hope so too, but that's not going to happen.
I don't know if this fucking match is in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but Yeah, it's fucking happening,
It
and
started June.
we have 4 fucking weeks of more of main event Glen Gilbertti getting a fucking push to the world title. I'm serious. This is when I stopped watching this show the first time I tried watching these. So, yeah, that brings us to the end of this crap show. Overall, match quality, an average of 3.75. Overall enjoyment, 4.5 out of 10. Another bipolar show. It started with a great match, and nothing else came close the rest of the show. Future build, and I should have known better, 2.0 out of 10, purely because they told us we're going to have Jerry Lynn versus Amazing Red next week. And that gave us an overall rating of 3.42. Way to go, guys. Way to go.
I'm hoping that we start to see some, I don't know what you call it, improvement. Because I know what we're getting in June. Because the first June show is Gilbertti versus Jeff Jarrett for the title. The middle of June is the 50th, is the first anniversary show, which is show 50.
Which means we're almost halfway done.
Yeah. I know what happens in July. I never thought I would say this. I'm looking forward to getting out of miserable May. I mean, that's what we got to call this month. It's miserable May on Something Else with Arya for Wednesdays in TNA. It's miserable May.
I can't wait till we get to October and every week we tease that Hulk Hogan is coming in.
Oh, October is awful. I have 3 words. Red shirt security.
It's also, they bring in Luger. By the way, when I talked about earlier about Miss Elizabeth dying, what you may forget is that, she was living with Lex Luger. They were, they were in a relationship, and Luger was so messed up that he could not do anything to help her when she was dying. And then WWE basically ran a story on Confidential that was to lead you to believe that Lex Luger is responsible for killing her, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. Boy, how things have changed. Oh yeah, and keeping in mind, Lex Luger is going to be arrested and charged with crimes relating to drug possession and all that. He's going to be in TNA in like 6 months. And if you think I'm lying, just wait. Just you wait.
And we're going to be over the halfway point during that month.
I will be screaming my head off at that point. Anywho, that is going to do it for this week's show. You have anything you want to say before we wrap things up?
Binding of Isaac is such a great game.
Sounds good. But by the way, Fight Forever is still $40 for the Xbox. Like, dude, the fucking game's been out for over 2 years, and it's not fucking worth $40. But anyway, thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the show. Talk again in 7 days.
Bye.